Picture this moment. A teletype machine breaks the morning silence at Quonset Point. The date reads April 10, 1943. Rhode Island's Naval Air Station receives an urgent transmission from Pacific Fleet headquarters. The message carries devastating news. Japanese night harassment tactics are breaking American forces. Guadalcanal reports soldiers collapsing from exhaustion. Sleep deprivation has become a weapon of war. Fleet commanders demand immediate solutions. Priority 1 orders establish VFN 75. America's first dedicated night fighter squadron springs into existence. Lieutenant Commander William J. Widthelm studies the personnel roster. 18 pilots report for duty. 6 ground officers join them. 30 enlisted men complete the unit. The pilot experience levels tell a sobering story. Only 5 men have instrument flying credentials. 3 have checked out in Corsairs. The remaining pilots know nothing beyond SNJ trainers. This desperate response to Japanese nocturnal terror would reshape carrier aviation forever. Within 18 months, these invisible hunters would dominate darkness so completely that Japanese pilots would choose suicide missions in daylight rather than face them in their natural element. American naval aviation had discovered a fatal weakness. August 1942 marked the beginning of systematic psychological warfare from above. Japanese aircraft perfected devastatingly simple tactics. Single planes appeared over American positions throughout darkness. Ancient float planes became instruments of torture. Pilots deliberately created engine sounds that drove men to madness. Marines on Guadalcanal coined the nickname "Washing Machine Charlie" for these tormentors. Sometimes bombs fell from above. Sometimes only flares lit the night. Often, the aircraft simply circled for hours. Engines droned endlessly overhead. Thousands of men lay awake, listening. Combat effectiveness crumbled through deliberate sleep deprivation. The Imperial Japanese Navy understood their limitations perfectly. American industrial might could never be matched. Daylight fighter performance favored the enemy overwhelmingly. Their answer was tactical brilliance that turned night itself into a weapon. Japanese naval aviators underwent ruthless selection processes. Night vision capability determined assignments from recruitment day forward. The best pilots flew obsolete aircraft that would mean instant death in daylight. These same machines became psychological terror weapons in darkness. American forces faced this threat with complete helplessness. Army Air Force P-70 fighters arrived at Guadalcanal in February 1943. They proved utterly inadequate against the nocturnal menace. Their operational ceiling fell short of requirements. Primitive radar systems offered minimal effectiveness. The aircraft themselves lacked necessary performance. The solution emerged from unexpected collaboration between military officers and civilian scientists. Massachusetts Institute of Technology's Radiation Laboratory provided the breakthrough. Project Affirm began operations in April 1942. Commander W.E.G. Taylor led the development effort. British radar technology required adaptation for naval aviation use. The team worked to compress ship-based capabilities into fighter-mounted systems. Success came with the AN/APS-4 radar system. Later, the AN/APS-6 would prove even more revolutionary. These airborne intercept radars represented miniaturization marvels. Ship-based radar capabilities now fit into pods small enough for single-seat fighters. The AN/APS-6 delivered quantum leap performance. Operating at 3.2 centimeter wavelength, it detected fighter-sized targets at 4 miles. Tracking continued to within 50 yards of contact. 2 operational modes provided tactical flexibility. Search mode showed targets as dots on 2-inch displays. Range and bearing information appeared instantly. Gun sight mode delivered precise steering cues for weapons employment. But technology alone could not win this war. Flying and fighting in absolute darkness required completely reimagining fighter tactics. Decades of daylight combat doctrine became worthless overnight. New procedures had to be invented from scratch. The aircraft selection process began with the Vought F-4U Corsair. 34 F-4U-2 variants emerged from field modification programs. Naval Aircraft Factory Philadelphia handled initial conversions. Naval Air Station San Diego completed additional units. Radar equipment mounted in streamlined fairings on starboard wings. Cockpit modifications were extensive and critical. Red lighting preserved precious night vision capabilities. Additional instruments enabled blind flying techniques. Radar scopes positioned for pilot monitoring without losing aircraft control. The Grumman F-6F Hellcat would eventually dominate these operations. F-6F-3N and F-6F-5N variants became primary carrier aircraft. Their stability and deck handling characteristics proved superior. Training for night combat pushed human endurance beyond normal limits. The newly established Night Fighter Training Unit at Naval Auxiliary Air Facility, Charlestown, Rhode Island, recreated carrier operations in complete darkness. Runways received dim lighting simulating carrier decks. Arresting gear stretched across concrete surfaces. From sunset to sunrise, the entire base operated under blackout conditions. Pilots learned to trust instruments when instincts screamed danger warnings. Radar return interpretation while flying complex intercept patterns. Landing on simulated carrier decks, guided by barely visible signals. The washout rate exceeded 60% of candidates. Those who survived emerged as a completely new breed of naval aviator. They operated in conditions experienced pilots considered suicidal. Lieutenant John Phillips had abandoned Bell Laboratories for naval aviation. This engineering graduate explained challenges to new students with brutal honesty. Forget everything you know about dogfighting. Night operations allow no second chances. The pilot who sees first shoots first and survives. Hesitation means death every single time. October 31, 1943, became a historic date in naval aviation. Lieutenant Hugh D. O'Neill Jr. made the first kill for VFN-75. Flying from Mundanu, Georgia, he intercepted a Mitsubishi G4M Betty bomber. The engagement occurred 12 miles southeast of the Shortland Islands. Radar-equipped fighters had successfully engaged enemy aircraft in total darkness. The psychological impact hit both sides immediately. Japanese aircrew, who had operated with complete impunity for over a year, suddenly faced invisible threats. American forces, tormented by nightly harassment, finally possessed effective defense. Night fighter capability expansion accelerated rapidly across the Pacific. VFN-76 commissioned on February 1, 1944. VFN-77, VFN-78, and additional squadrons followed in quick succession. Eventually, 14 squadrons would operate these specialized aircraft. Each unit developed tactical innovations shared through detailed after-action reports. Sophisticated doctrine emerged, transforming night fighting from desperate improvisation to precise science. Lieutenant Commander Richard E. Harmer commanded VFN 101 during the Marshall Islands Campaign. His squadron demonstrated evolutionary advances on January 29, 1944. USS Enterprise launched the first carrier-based night fighter combat mission. F-4U-2 Corsairs flew into darkness over enemy territory near Truk. Harmer intercepted a Betty bomber using tactics impossible without radar technology. Traditional pursuit tactics gave way to altitude advantage exploitation. He climbed above the target, controlling the engagement completely. His diving attack caught the Japanese crew completely unaware. The bomber exploded after a single firing pass. Technology and tactics the Japanese could neither match nor counter had claimed another victory. Carrier night operations presented staggering technical challenges. Landing on pitching decks in daylight required exceptional pilot skill. Performing identical tasks in darkness with only dim lights and landing signal officer paddles pushed human capabilities beyond normal limits. Initial accident rates exceeded 30% of operations. Barriers failed stopping aircraft that missed arresting wires. Crashed aircraft turned flight decks into blazing infernos. But procedures evolved rapidly through harsh experience. Pilots developed precise communication protocols for darkness operations. Altitude and distance callouts maintained spacing without visual references. Fuel minimums established critical safety margins. Any aircraft with less than 200 pounds remaining would ditch alongside destroyers rather than risk deck crashes. Japanese attempts to counter American night fighters revealed their technological deficit depth. Fleet Radio Unit Pacific intercepted intelligence reports documenting emergency conferences. Senior naval aviators debated response options desperately. Some advocated abandoning night operations entirely. Others proposed primitive radar warning receivers for detecting American fighters. Japan's electronics industry, already strained by wartime demands, could not match American production capabilities. Westinghouse alone manufactured over 2,000 radar sets. Japanese firms managed fewer than 50 airborne units during the entire war. Most proved too unreliable for combat use under operational conditions. The transformation accelerated with F-6F 3N Hellcat introduction in early 1944. More stable than the Corsair, with superior deck handling characteristics. The Hellcat proved ideal for night carrier operations. Squadrons developed innovative tactics exploiting radar capabilities fully. Radar picket positioning placed fighters at specific points. Invisible barriers prevented enemy aircraft passage undetected. Hunter-killer teams used one fighter for target tracking. Another maintained visual lookout duties. Ship-based fighter directors learned vectoring multiple intercepts simultaneously. Fighters, stacked at different altitudes, created impenetrable defensive screens. Commander Turner F. Caldwell represented the next evolutionary leap forward. This visionary had lobbied persistently for dedicated night carrier operations. Caldwell argued that mixing day and night fighters on conventional carriers compromised both capabilities. His revolutionary solution converted entire carriers exclusively for night operations. August 15, 1944 materialized his vision when Night Air Group 41 embarked aboard USS Independence. The world's first dedicated night carrier began operations. Conversion was comprehensive and thorough. Independence received additional radar systems providing unprecedented situational awareness. Flight deck lighting reconfigured for minimal visibility requirements. Maintenance schedules inverted with primary operations in darkness. Repairs occurred during daylight hours. The air group consisted of VFN-41 with 14 F-6F-5N Hellcats. VTN-41 operated 12 radar-equipped TBM Avengers. Every aspect from crew training to meal schedules optimized for nocturnal operations. September 12, 1944 marked Night Air Group 41's first offensive sweep over the Philippines. The mission profile demonstrated unprecedented audacity. Arrive over enemy territory at dusk. Orbit airfields continuously. Destroy any aircraft attempting night operations. Lieutenant William E. Henry led the fighter sweep. Formation integrity maintained through radar coordination. Navigation proceeded by dead reckoning over vast ocean distances. At 21:45 hours, his scope revealed multiple contacts rising from Clark Field. Japanese aircraft expected routine harassment missions. They flew predictable patterns perfectly suited for ambush. Henry's coordinated attack destroyed 6 aircraft in 3 minutes. Surviving Japanese pilots scattered in complete panic. Some collided in darkness without visual references. Others crashed attempting emergency landings without runway lights. Mission's end brought devastating results. Night Air Group 41 claimed 14 aerial victories. 20 ground kills added to the total. Not a single American aircraft lost. The Battle of Leyte Gulf in October 1944 demonstrated night fighters' strategic impact. Japanese naval forces attempted their final decisive engagement. American night fighters flew continuous patrols, preventing enemy reconnaissance completely. Lieutenant Edward Chastain of VFN 41 intercepted 3 scout planes on October 24th. They searched desperately for Task Force 38. Without accurate position reports, Japanese fleet elements blundered into uncoordinated engagements. Catastrophic defeat resulted from this intelligence failure. Night fighters had evolved from defensive necessities to offensive enablers. Technological sophistication continued advancing throughout 1944 and 1945. The AN/APS-6A radar in late-war F-6F-5N fighters detected targets at 6 miles. Multiple contacts tracked simultaneously. IFF identification friend or foe systems prevented friendly fire incidents that plagued early operations. VHF radios allowed precise communication between fighters and controllers hundreds of miles apart. Small details mattered tremendously. Specially designed red goggles preserved night vision while allowing instrument reading. Japanese aviators improvised with makeshift solutions throughout the war. Training programs reflected American industrial advantages completely. The Night Attack and Combat Training Unit at Charlestown graduated 50 pilots monthly. Instructors were combat veterans returning from Pacific operations. They shared expertise gained through actual combat experience. Synthetic training devices, including primitive flight simulators, allowed practice without burning precious fuel. Japanese training collapsed under fuel shortages and loss of experienced instructors. New pilots arrived at combat units with less than 100 hours total flight time. No night training whatsoever. Obsolete aircraft lacking radar capabilities. Lieutenant Commander James S. Gray commanded VFN 78 operating from USS Intrepid. Gray exemplified the new generation of night fighter tacticians. He developed the loose deuce formation. 2 fighters operating independently within mutual support range. This seemingly simple innovation doubled coverage area while reducing collision risk significantly. August 31, 1944, marked Gray's first victory. He damaged a Betty bomber 90 miles east of Iwo Jima. This began a campaign claiming multiple victories, despite equipment limitations of early radar sets. The human dimension produced extraordinary stories of courage under impossible conditions. Lieutenant Robert Blackwell of VFN 91 became separated from USS Yorktown during a typhoon February 3, 1945. Radar malfunctioning and fuel critical. He navigated by dead reckoning through turbulence so severe it repeatedly slammed him against the canopy. 3 hours of desperate flying. Finally, he detected a faint radar return. It proved to be his carrier. Landing with less than 5 gallons remaining. His aircraft so damaged it never flew again. Japanese pilots displayed equal courage in increasingly hopeless circumstances. Ensign Yukio Sato flew an obsolete Nakajima J-1N night fighter. He engaged 4 Hellcats simultaneously March 15, 1945. Hopelessly outmatched, no radar inferior performance outnumbered 4-1. He damaged 1 American fighter before being shot down. His sacrifice allowed a reconnaissance aircraft to complete its mission. Individual heroism could not overcome systematic technological inferiority. It demonstrated warrior spirit, transcending material disadvantage. Night Air Group 90 replaced Air Group 41 aboard Enterprise December 1944. This represented further evolution in night fighting capabilities. Lieutenant Commander William R. Winston commanded VFN 90. The squadron flew newest F-6F-5N fighters with improved APS-6A radar. They had completed over 3,000 practice intercepts at Barbers Point, Hawaii. Winston introduced revolutionary barrier patrol tactics. Fighters positioned to create overlapping coverage zones. Penetration became virtually impossible for enemy aircraft. January 12, 1945, during operations supporting the Lingayen Gulf invasion, VFN 90 demonstrated complete American night supremacy. Multiple waves of Japanese aircraft attempted attacking the invasion fleet after dark. Winston's fighters vectored by ship-based controllers using sophisticated radar plotting. Perfect positioning achieved for every intercept. Lieutenant John Morris destroyed 3 bombers in a single pass. 6 machine guns converged at precisely calculated range. Lieutenant William Levering shot down 2 torpedo bombers while flying below 100 feet altitude. He used radar altimeter to avoid the ocean while tracking targets against sea clutter. The mathematics proved devastating for Japanese forces. That single night, American night fighters claimed 43 confirmed victories. 0 losses sustained. Post-war Japanese records revealed crushing statistics. Of 197 aircraft launched, only 34 returned operational. The psychological impact was absolutely crushing. Lieutenant Commander Susumu Kimura, one of few survivors, testified, "We could not see American fighters, but they saw us perfectly. Like fighting ghosts with machine guns. The darkness we had mastered became our grave." Production statistics revealed the industrial chasm between nations. Between March 1944 and August 1945, American factories produced over 26,000 ASB radar sets, 2,000 AN/APS-6 units manufactured. Japanese electronics firms managed fewer than 50 primitive airborne radars. Most failed after minimal use under combat conditions. American carriers received continuous upgrades throughout the war. Improved radar systems, better radio equipment, refined instruments for precision operations. Japanese units cannibalized wrecked aircraft for spare parts, a downward spiral accelerating toward complete collapse. The broader naval campaign demonstrated night fighters' strategic value beyond individual victories. Japanese inability to conduct reconnaissance meant American fleet movements remained concealed. This operational surprise contributed decisively to victories at Philippine Sea. Night fighters prevented Japanese scouts from locating Task Force 58. The Marianas Turkey Shoot was already underway before enemy forces understood American positions. At Okinawa, continuous night fighter patrols rendered Japanese airfields unusable after dark. Enemy operations compressed into daylight hours. There they faced overwhelming American superiority. Maintenance crews deserved equal recognition for the night fighter revolution. Working in blacked-out hangars, performing complex repairs by touch and dim red light. Radar technicians represented a specialty created specifically for night fighters. They troubleshot classified equipment without complete schematics. Their dedication achieved operational readiness rates exceeding daylight squadrons, despite radar complexity and harsh operating conditions. Chief Aviation Electrician's mate Harold Patterson of VFN 41 exemplified this dedication, working 36 straight hours to repair battle damage, sleeping beside aircraft between launches, his commitment typical of maintenance personnel throughout the Pacific. Weather emerged as an unexpected ally for American forces. Japanese doctrine emphasized clear conditions for visual navigation. American radar-equipped fighters operated effectively in clouds, rain, and fog, conditions that grounded enemy aircraft completely. Several major raids were disrupted not by combat, but by weather. Americans penetrated while Japanese could not. All-weather capability multiplied effective operational tempo. Continuous pressure regardless of conditions. Communication technology proved equally vital for coordinated operations. TBS talk between ships' radio allowed fighter directors coordinating multiple intercepts simultaneously. Data links transmitted radar information between ships. Shared tactical pictures created fleet-wide situational awareness. Voice procedures, standardized fleet-wide, reduced confusion and increased efficiency dramatically. The electromagnetic spectrum had become another battlefield. American superiority in electronics provided decisive advantage. Individual squadrons developed unique innovations throughout the campaign. VFN 91, operating from USS Hornet, pioneered intruder missions. Single fighters penetrating Japanese airspace to attack aircraft during takeoff and landing. These missions required extraordinary navigation skills. Pilots flew hundreds of miles over water in darkness, arriving over enemy airfields at precisely calculated times. Lieutenant Robert Holden demonstrated the tactic's effectiveness April 14, 1945, destroying 3 aircraft over Kanoya Airfield, returning safely despite intense anti-aircraft fire. The Japanese perspective revealed through post-war interrogations and captured documents showed growing desperation. Admiral Soemu Toyoda admitted that American night fighters had destroyed our capability for offensive operations after dark. We could neither attack their ships nor defend our bases. The sanctuary of darkness became our tomb. Junior officers reported veteran pilots feigning illness rather than fly night missions, knowing that radar-equipped Hellcats meant almost certain death. VTN-90, the torpedo squadron component of Night Air Group 90, demonstrated that night capabilities extended beyond fighters. Flying radar-equipped TBM-3E Avengers, they conducted night torpedo attacks. Mine-laying operations even achieved aerial victories against enemy aircraft. Lieutenant Charles Henderson claimed 4 aircraft destroyed, including a Kawanishi H-8K flying boat. This proved night combat effectiveness was not limited to specialized fighters. Technological progression continued accelerating throughout 1945. Plans existed for F-6, F-6N variants with more powerful engines. Advanced APS-12 radar, capable of tracking targets at 10 miles. The F-4U-5N Corsair was entering production, performance exceeding any Japanese aircraft. Jet-powered night fighters were on drawing boards. The atomic bombs that ended the war also ended these development programs. But the foundation for all future night combat aviation had been established. Training accidents provided harsh lessons that improved procedures continuously. The collision of 2 Hellcats over USS Randolph, January 18, 1945, led to mandatory altitude separation for night formations. The loss of Lieutenant Commander Robert Campbell's entire division during night training December 3, 1944, resulted in new weather minimums for group operations. Each tragedy contributed to institutional knowledge, saved future lives while pushing boundaries of what was considered possible. Economic analysis revealed surprising efficiency in night fighter operations. Despite higher training costs and equipment complexity, night fighters achieved kill ratios exceeding daylight fighters, approximately 18-1 for night fighters, versus 11-1 for day fighters by 1945. The psychological impact reduced enemy operations more effectively than attrition alone. Investment in night fighter capability multiplied returns, validating those who had championed the program despite initial skepticism and bureaucratic resistance. The cultural transformation within naval aviation was profound and lasting. Night fighter pilots, initially viewed with suspicion by traditional squadrons, earned respect through demonstrated effectiveness. Their specialized skills instrument, flying radar interpretation, radio coordination, became mandatory for all naval aviators post-war. The night fighter campaign had proven modern air combat required technical proficiency, equaling or exceeding traditional flying skills. The cowboy era of intuitive flying was ending. The age of the systems operator had begun. Logistics supporting night operations were immense and complex. Radar sets required specialized maintenance by electronics technicians rather than traditional mechanics. Spare parts traveled thousands of miles across the Pacific, protected from corrosive salt air. Special red light bulbs, radar scopes, electronic components. Each required separate supply chains. The success of night fighters represented logistics triumph as much as tactical innovation. May 13, 1945, marked a significant milestone. VFN 41 achieved recognition when Lieutenant J.E. Smith became the squadron's fifth ace. 7 confirmed night victories distinguished his service. This concentration of expertise in a single squadron demonstrated lethal efficiency. 5 aces among 14 pilots. Specialized training and superior equipment created unprecedented capability. By comparison, Japanese night fighter units lacking radar and adequate training rarely achieved even single victories. Against American bombers, the influence extended beyond naval aviation into other services. Marine Night Fighter Squadron, VMFN 513, trained by Navy instructors. Equipped with Navy-developed radar, achieved remarkable success from shore bases. Army Air Force squadrons adopted Navy procedures and equipment, reversing typical inter-service rivalry. The night fighter campaign had created a brotherhood of pilots. They shared unique skills transcending service boundaries. Environmental factors unique to the Pacific required constant adaptation. Tropical thunderstorms could destroy aircraft as effectively as enemy fighters. Bioluminescent plankton stirred by ship wakes revealed fleet positions to alert enemies. Vast distances meant fuel management often determined mission success more than combat skill. Each factor required specific tactical adaptations, accumulating into comprehensive doctrine applicable worldwide. The final months of war saw American night dominance so complete. Japanese naval aviation essentially abandoned nocturnal operations. VFN 103 aboard USS Bonhomme Richard flew patrols in July 1945. Without encountering any enemy aircraft, none dared fly after dark. The transformation from helpless victims of washing machine Charlie to absolute masters of darkness had taken less than 2 years, a revolution in military affairs comparable to the introduction of radar itself. July 29, 1945, marked Lieutenant Robert Holden of VFN 91 conducting what would be the final night fighter engagement. Intercepting a Yokosuka P-1Y reconnaissance aircraft attempting to photograph invasion fleet. Holden pursued for 7 minutes through violent evasive maneuvers. That would have succeeded against any daylight fighter, but radar maintained lock throughout. His guns found their mark. The Francis plunged into the ocean, taking with it the last remnants of Japanese night aviation capability. Statistical analysis revealed staggering results. Between April 1943 and August 1945, American carrier-based night fighters claimed 579 confirmed aerial victories, against 32 operational losses, a kill ratio of 18-1. Japanese night operations, which had tormented American forces throughout 1942 and early 1943, had been so thoroughly suppressed Personnel arriving in theater after mid-1944 never experienced night attacks. The psychological warfare Japan had wielded effectively for 2 years had been turned against them with devastating efficiency. Post-war evaluation by the United States Strategic Bombing Survey concluded night fighters had contributed disproportionately to the collapse of Japanese air power by denying enemy forces the sanctuary of darkness. American fighters compressed Japanese operations into daylight hours, where they faced overwhelming numerical and qualitative superiority. The psychological impact was equally significant. Japanese pilots, knowing that neither darkness nor weather offered protection, suffered morale collapse manifesting in increased accidents, desertions, and refusal to fly combat missions. Individual courage of night fighter pilots deserved special recognition. Flying alone into hostile darkness beyond help range required particular bravery. Unlike daylight fighters, who could see threats approaching, night fighter pilots lived in constant uncertainty, never knowing whether the next radar contact was enemy or friendly, whether their next landing would be successful or fatal. The accident rate for night operations remained triple that of daylight throughout the war. Yet volunteers never wavered in their commitment. Commander Caldwell's Night Air Group 41 exemplified this dedication. In 7 months of combat from independence, the squadron flew 1,743 sorties, logged 4,892 combat hours, claimed 46 aerial victories. 5 pilots became aces, including Lieutenant William Henry with 7 victories, despite being shot down twice, spending 18 hours in life rafts. The squadron's loss rate of 27% was considered acceptable by night fighter standards, testament to extraordinary dangers these pioneers faced nightly. The technological legacy extended far beyond military applications. Miniaturized radar systems developed for night fighters enabled civilian aviation to operate safely in all weather conditions. Precise navigation techniques required for night intercepts contributed to modern air traffic control development. Even red lighting, preserving night vision, became standard in applications from astronomy to medicine. The Night Fighter campaign had driven innovation benefiting all humanity. The broader implications for military doctrine were profound and lasting. Night fighting demonstrated that technological superiority could completely overturn traditional military advantages. The Japanese Navy had spent decades developing night combat expertise, selecting and training personnel specifically for darkness operations. American forces, starting from zero capability in early 1943, achieved absolute dominance within 18 months through superior equipment and adaptive doctrine. The lesson was clear. In modern warfare, technological adaptation trumped traditional expertise. Leadership at squadron level proved crucial for success. Lieutenant Commander Russell Rieger later commanded VFN 76. He instituted rigorous training requiring each pilot to complete 50 practice intercepts before attempting combat missions. His insistence on perfection before engagement resulted in his squadron achieving 23 victories, without a single operational loss to enemy action. An unprecedented achievement in aerial combat. This emphasis on thorough preparation became standard throughout night fighter squadrons. The industrial foundation of success extended beyond radar manufacturing. Grumman modified production lines to accommodate night fighter variants. Without disrupting daylight fighter output, specialized training aircraft were developed, including radar-equipped SNJ trainers with hooded cockpits for instrument practice. Even seemingly minor items like luminous instrument paint required industrial mobilization that Japan with its resource constraints and damaged infrastructure, could not match. Weather's role as force multiplier for American night fighters cannot be overstated. During the Philippines campaign, monsoon conditions grounded Japanese aircraft for weeks, while radar-equipped Hellcats continued operations. This all-weather capability meant American carriers could maintain continuous pressure, regardless of conditions, while Japanese forces remained paralyzed by weather. That had traditionally provided operational pauses. The evolution from defensive to offensive night operations marked strategic maturation. Instead of waiting for Japanese attacks, American night fighters hunted enemy aircraft at their bases. Operation Gratitude, on July 25, 1945, saw 32 night fighters destroy 29 Japanese aircraft, 18 on the ground, 11 airborne, effectively eliminating night capability from an entire sector. Such operations would have been impossible without radar navigation and precise timing enabled by advanced equipment. Communication advances proved as important as radar. By 1945, American night fighters operated with 4 radio frequencies: one for ship control, one for division coordination, one for emergency use, one for landing approach. This redundancy ensured continuous contact. Despite equipment failures or enemy jamming attempts, Japanese forces limited to single frequencies, often shared between units, suffered communications chaos during night operations. Maintenance evolution paralleled operational advancement. By wars, specialized night fighter maintenance units could perform complete radar overhauls aboard ship, capability unimaginable 2 years earlier. Chief aviation machinists, Mate Robert Chen of VFN 90, developed field modifications improving radar reliability by 40%. Innovations rapidly disseminated throughout the fleet. Such grassroots innovation encouraged by command structure continuously improved capabilities. The Pacific distances created unique challenges for night operations. Night fighters often operated at maximum range, requiring precise fuel management. Lieutenant Donald Patterson of VFN 41 perfected economy cruise settings that extended range by 20%, allowing deeper penetrations into enemy territory. These techniques shared through squadron newsletters and training programs exemplified the continuous improvement culture that characterized American night fighter development. Cultural impact on Japanese forces was devastating beyond measure. Post-war interviews revealed that night fighter effectiveness had convinced many Japanese pilots that Americans possessed supernatural abilities, seeing in darkness, reading minds appearing from nowhere. This psychological defeat, beyond mere tactical losses, contributed to broader collapse of Japanese military morale. The technological superiority had created mythology that transcended rational explanation. Marine Captain Marion Carl, visiting Navy night fighter squadrons in 1945, observed, "The Navy has created something entirely new. Warriors who fight in a realm where traditional combat skills are useless. These pilots operate more like submariners than fighter pilots, hunting by instrument, killing without seeing their victims." It's simultaneously impressive and unsettling. The economic efficiency of night fighters validated investment completely. Analysis showed that each night fighter ace had prevented approximately 50 tons of bombs from reaching American forces. Damage prevention exceeding the cost of entire squadrons. The sleep preservation alone allowing thousands of personnel to rest without harassment provided combat effectiveness, improvements impossible to quantify, but universally acknowledged as decisive. Final operations demonstrated complete mastery over enemy forces. VFN 91's last combat patrol on August 14, 1945, flew over Japanese home islands without encountering opposition. Enemy aircraft remained grounded, rather than face certain destruction from invisible predators. The transformation from victims to victors was complete. What had begun with desperate attempts to stop washing machine Charlie had evolved into absolute ownership of darkness. The legacy influenced military aviation for generations. Korean War night operations built directly on Pacific experience. Vietnam's night campaigns used procedures developed over Guadalcanal. Modern stealth aircraft designed for undetected penetration of enemy airspace trace conceptual ancestry to radar-equipped Hellcats. That first made darkness an American domain. The revolution begun in 1943 continues shaping aerial warfare today. Admiral John S. McCain, Jr., reflecting on the campaign, observed, "We entered the war unable to defend against even primitive night harassment. We ended it with such complete mastery that enemy pilots preferred capture to flying after dark. This transformation, achieved in less than 2 years during wartime conditions, represents one of the most remarkable adaptations in military history." The human dimension remained paramount, despite technological emphasis. Each victory represented individual courage. Pilots alone in darkness, beyond help. Trusting instruments and training against every survival instinct. Lieutenant William Crawford, on his 23rd birthday, spent 14 hours in shark-infested waters after a night engagement. Lieutenant Robert Murray landed his severely damaged Hellcat blind after enemy fire destroyed his canopy and instruments. Ensign James Patterson caught the last arresting wire, with his tailhook partially severed, stopping feet from disaster. Each story testified to extraordinary courage, matching technological innovation. As dawn broke on August 15, 1945, Lieutenant Commander Winston led the final night fighter patrol of World War II. His Hellcats circled above Task Force 38, radar scanning empty skies for enemies who no longer came. The transformation was complete and irreversible. Less than 28 months earlier, American forces had cowered helplessly under Japanese night attacks. Exhausted and demoralized by an enemy they could neither see nor stop. Now, as morning light revealed defeated Japan, American night fighters owned the darkness so completely that enemy pilots chose death over encountering them. The statistics told only part of the story. Yes, 579 victories against 32 losses was remarkable. Yes, 14 squadrons from 0 in 2 years represented extraordinary expansion. But the true victory was psychological and doctrinal. America had proven that technological innovation properly applied could overturn any traditional military advantage. The nation that better integrated science with warfare would prevail. Regardless of warrior tradition or individual courage, in the pre-dawn darkness of August 15, 1945, the radar scope in Winston's Hellcat showed nothing but empty sky. The Japanese pilots who had once terrorized American forces with impunity were gone, destroyed not just physically but psychologically, by an enemy that had transformed their sanctuary into a hunting ground. The revolution was complete. The night belonged to America, and with it, the future of aerial warfare had been forever transformed.